and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sara.
And tonight we will be discussing Maskerade by Terry Pratchett. But before we get there, Sara, what's something great that happened recently?
Something great that happened recently is it rained the other day, so I think I'm legally obliged to use that as my good thing for this episode.
Oh, I'm like knee deep in rain, so that has lost its novelty real fast.
There was so much rain. It was great. I mean, like, this may be the only rain we see this season. Actually, I don't think that's going to be the case because the weather app tells me that's not. But as a Californian, I believe that each rain I've seen is going to be the last. So I was very excited to get like a whole bunch of rain, pouring down rain, more rain than I've seen in a while.
It hailed up here. I'm officially upset with the weather.
Send that hail my way, please.
Gross, you can have it. Well, that's clearly not my good thing, because that's a terrible thing. And no one likes hail. That's no one's favorite weather movement.
I mean, it is when you can just stay inside and you don't have to like go outside in it.
That's still not your favorite. You still wouldn't prefer that over rain or snow.
I wouldn't prefer it over rain. This is true. Hail and snow. Hail, I am more likely to get in my area of California, so I am more interested in it than snow.
That wasn't the question.
If it snowed in the Bay Area, I'd be very concerned, and that would override my feelings for snow.
Well, that's not relevant.
It's not relevant in the least.
No, my good thing was that I went to a corn maze.
Glad you had a good time.
It was great. I was way too tired for walking 2 whole miles. But Carpenito Brothers down in Kent does like a different design every year. And so this year were these cute little alien tourists, and the other half of the maze was a big old spaceship. It was very cool. And then I also bought the biggest head of cauliflower I've ever seen.
How large would it be?
Like a basketball. It's like a fucking basketball.
A very large head of cauliflower.
It was.
What did you do with it?
Ate it.
Obviously. I mean, I didn't think you bought it and then just dropped it in your compost. I'm saying, like,
I did do that with the bell peppers, though. Not on purpose, but it happens.
It does happen. It's true.
Dude, it went into like 3 different meals.
Okay, but like,
it was so big. I threw it into a fakey chow mein. I threw it into a 1-sheet pan gnocchi thing, and then more things. There was more of it than that, but this was like a week ago. I don't remember. I have no memory of this.
That's fair. I would not be able to answer that question either, so.
Well, I went to a corn maze and got some giant vegetables, and it was very fun.
Delightful.
Well, Sara, what are you drinking this evening?
I'm drinking boxed rosé wine because it was just a little too cold today to have cider.
Oh, cider's totally a winter drink. I disagree completely.
Cider is a winter drink. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that when my toes are turning blue, I don't necessarily want to drink cider.
Rosé is a summer drink, though, so you picked wrong.
Rosé was what I had boxed. If I had mulled wine, I would have been drinking mulled wine.
Well, you should have done what I did, which was drink boxed red wine. Completely different. Clearly the superior choice.
Totally different.
I don't know what you were even thinking.
I was thinking that I don't want my teeth stained red, even though I'm just in my own house and no one is going to see me.
That's only a problem when you're outside. So have you read anything good lately? I have fallen into a Teen Wolf fanfiction hole, so the answer is no. Nothing good.
I read a very short, I don't know how to describe it. It's not a novella, but it's like a collection of short stories that is in itself very short, by Christina Mirzoy, whose name I may or may not be mispronouncing horribly. And it was very, not spooky month, but like very kind of fall fairy tale vibes, but not like the happy princess fairy tale vibes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very atmospheric and seasonally appropriate.
It was atmospheric and seasonally appropriate.
I just rented an ebook from my local library. Well, I've had some Agatha Christie rented, and I have not listened to a second of it. I'm not an ebook person. I'm trying to make it happen.
Audiobook? If you've listened to it, not
Yeah, that's
listened
what
to
I
it.
meant. That's what I meant. They're still electronic. I'm not wrong.
They are still electronic, but ebook and audiobook do mean two very different things.
Yeah, they're completely different things. I completely meant audiobook. Anyway, but I've been on the wait list for the first book of The Expanse, which I've been meaning to read. So maybe that will force me to actually listen to audiobooks, or maybe it will just be the decider that this is a mistake and I'm not an audiobook person, which is very possible.
I mean, audiobooks are a legitimate form of reading, but they're not for everyone.
It sure ain't for me most of the time.
Yeah, they're definitely not for me. I wish I could do audiobooks, but I can't.
Yeah. I can do them on like a road trip. They have a very specific purpose to me.
Yeah.
Well, we are actually discussing none of these things tonight. We're actually talking about Maskerade by Terry Pratchett, which, am I saying the title right?
It is Maskerade.
It is. He spelled it funny, so that is spelled funny, right? I'm not making that up.
It is spelled funny. The normal word is not spelled with a K.
That's what I thought.
But Terry Pratchett spells it M-A-S-K.
He can do whatever he wants.
It's a pun. He's wearing a mask.
But that's not a pun. Masquerade is already referring to masks.
So it's a pun. It's a very Discworld pun.
That's not how puns work.
I say it's a pun and you can't convince me otherwise.
Well, let me look up the definition of a pun here. You've derailed us. This is what we're doing now.
It's a play on words.
It's not, because it doesn't change the definition of the word at all. A joke exploiting the different possible meanings of a word. It refers to a mask, whether it's spelled with a K or a Q.
But it's still a play on words.
No, not the meaning of it.
It's not a play on the meaning of it.
And that's what a pun is.
It's a play on the spelling of it. That still counts.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Literally does not.
I told you you're not going to be able to convince me otherwise.
Okay, you can be wrong then. Well, I was frantically speed reading this book today because your girl procrastinated.
As opposed to me, who read it like 3 weeks ago for when we were supposed to do this episode. So I'm going to be very wrong about a lot of things in this episode.
Like the definition of puns. I walked right into that one, didn't you?
I mean, I didn't walk into it. I knew it was coming. I was giving you the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I found myself wishing I had given myself enough time to watch The Phantom of the Opera because I haven't seen that movie since middle school or something. It's been a very long time.
Confession time, I've never actually watched it.
I don't think you're missing out on that much.
No, I don't think I am either.
That was a very low drama confession. Low stakes.
This book, story time, I went to France with my father in like 7th grade. And this was before we had like reliable Wi-Fi and cell phones that could connect to the internet and things like that. So this was this 2-week trip. I brought 2 books. I'm a very fast reader. One of them was Maskerade, and the other was this like World of Pern book that was not actually a story, but like describing, you know, the setting of Pern. And I read Maskerade so many times on that trip that I decided I never wanted to read it again. Enough time has passed between then and now that I did enjoy it. But whenever I pick it up, that's all I think about is just how it was the only thing I had to read for like 2 weeks.
That is a great comment on how one's reading experience really colors your opinion of a book.
Mm-hmm.
And B, that's such a bummer because this is such a great book.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I was reading it this time, I was like, man, I actually really am enjoying myself. But I have these feelings hard coded into me that make me feel like I don't like the book, which is completely a me problem because it's a good fun book. But yeah, reading it as many times as I did on that trip just stripped all of the joy out of it.
I can only imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But oh shit, now I'm just like contemplating all of my weird book sense memories. Like speed reading the fifth Harry Potter book the day it came out so no one could spoil it for me because I was of an age where if you didn't read it fast enough, the other kids in your school would spoil it for you on purpose. That was a whole thing.
I mean, parts of Twitter are still like that. Not necessarily with the Harry Potter books, but
Yeah, but you can
in
avoid
general.
Twitter. That's so much easier than avoiding the place you're legally required to be for 8 hours a day.
You mean I'm not legally required to be on Twitter for 8 hours a day?
Well, you might be soon. Who knows what the rules are going to be.
Anyway.
Yeah, but I can like vividly recall that corner of my bedroom as it was at the time, just because that was such like an event. Anyway, this book, however, might be one of my favorite Pratchett books that we've read so far. It does so many things right, and I can't think of any of our usual complaints.
I mean, that's finally we're getting to Terry Pratchett books that we don't have complaints about. That's a nice thing.
And it's close. It's not that he doesn't push the envelope, so to speak. He takes risks, but I feel like he finally figured out how to punch up, so to speak.
Definitely in this book, he doesn't feel like he's making fun of minorities in a mean and unfriendly way.
Particularly the main character. I would call Agnes the main character.
I think so.
The witches, Granny and Nanny, of course, always steal the show, but they're not the ones that are like embedded in the plot the way Agnes is.
Yeah, I would say that Agnes and her actions kind of drive the plot. Granny and Nanny are acting around it, but they're not central to the storyline in the same way.
Even though they're the ones that end up solving the mystery.
Even though they're the ones that end up solving the mystery.
They do swoop in and get all of the credit at the end, and that's kind of par for the course for them.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, Agnes is fat. And this is the first time Pratchett has written a fat character and then critiqued the characters around her for having stupid expectations because of that.
Yeah, I mean, Lady Sybil, Vimes's wife, is fat, but because she's such a tertiary character, I mean, we don't get a lot of her. It doesn't feel like there's any exploration of her appearance really at all.
I also feel like that's more of a gray area that is she just huge? Is she just 8 feet tall? It's not exactly, I don't think it's that particularly described, or at least in the ones that I've read.
I mean, I've never thought of her as being tall, particularly. Like, I've always thought of his descriptions of her as making her fat.
Oh, I've never read them that way. Interesting. It always seemed more just like she's just a big person.
Large in general. No, I've always envisaged her as fat, but irrelevant because she doesn't show up in this book.
At all.
At
or
all.
much in the other books at all.
Or much in the other books, yeah.
Whereas Agnes is actually a main character. And a lot of this book revolves around how people treat her because of her appearance and make so many assumptions about her. And she struggles with that, but then also does in some ways work it to her advantage in a very witchy way. But it was nice seeing the narrative lambast the correct people.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Agnes has never been my favorite, probably because of my experience reading this book over and over and over and over and over again. But I found myself really enjoying her character and her observations about the people around her and her insistence that no, she wasn't going to be a witch. She was going to go off and do her own thing that she enjoyed and that she wanted to do. She wasn't going to just stick with what was expected of her by the people of Lancre.
I loved her reimagining of herself as Perdita X.
What like 18-year-old has never wanted to do that?
Incredible. The explanation for the initial X is also just fantastic and perfect. And it's gotta throw some fun letters in there sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Her counterpoint, however, is Christine, who I hated the perfect amount.
Christine was kind of horrible. I mean, like, not obviously the character was intended to be kind of horrible, but like as a person, she's not intentionally bad. She's just really, I don't know if I want to say dumb, because she's not stupid, but
Shallow. She's extremely shallow.
she's very shallow and very calculating in how to best present herself.
There's a line about how Agnes realized with some sinking suspicion or something that Christine is actually very smart because she always faints at exactly the right time and revives at exactly the like most convenient moment.
Like what is going to make her look the best or look the most attractive?
Mm-hmm. And I don't think all of that's necessarily conscious on her part.
I don't think all of it is, for sure.
But more of it is, I think, than she lets on.
Yeah.
But she's also the fucking worst.
Well, because she's so self-absorbed, she's the worst.
Yeah. Yes. So they do the, oh, what old movie was that? You know, that movie about talkies. And then the one actress has to do the voice for the other actress. It's a whole thing.
I do not know the movie.
Oh, is it Singing in the Rain? Did I just describe Singing in the Rain?
Maybe. I don't know. Singing in the Rain is the Rain in Spain one.
No. That's My Fair Lady.
Yes, you're right. That is My Fair Lady.
Yes. No, but the like beautiful actress star who has a terrible voice, and so someone fakes the voice from behind her is 100% Singing in the Rain, which I probably should have been able to articulate without frantic Googling.
I mean, I would never have gotten there, so.
I just know how keywords work. It's okay.
I meant that I would never have gotten to Singing in the Rain without Googling.
Well, I didn't either. I have seen it, but God, it's been a minute. So we have the Singing in the Rain, we have the Phantom of the Opera, and then we have the witches, and it's just a delightful, like, ridiculous mashup, and a couple people die, and it's fun.
I was sad about the deaths, though.
Really?
Yeah, I was sad about them. The one that I want to talk about or call out in particular as me being sad about is maybe a spoiler. I mean, not a major spoiler.
No, we can wait.
I mean, yes, there are some deaths that have less bearing, like the rat catcher.
Oh, that was the one I was more sad about. Oh. Incorrect answer.
I mean, I never liked death. Death as a character is great. I never liked deaths in books.
You saw my horrified face and
yes.
quickly backpedaled. This book does a great job of making fun of that special brand of rich people who want to be seen at the opera.
This book has some choice comments about money, actually, just in general.
If there's one thing that Pratchett generally gets right, it was his takes on class.
Yes. Yeah, he's got some very witty and relevant things to say on class and wealth in this book, but like you say, in all of his books. He doesn't get everything right, but he gets that right.
We can't spend the whole time about this book talking about how he's done other things wrong, because he doesn't actually do anything wrong in this book.
We could talk about how much fun the nanny and granny dynamic is in this book.
Yes, I feel like this was the first time I was able to like really indulge in it. In some of the previous books, although specific examples don't come to mind, one of them has annoyed me to the extent, one or the other has annoyed me to the extent that the whole thing was just like a little bit tinged.
I think this is one of the first times where, at least for me, their dynamic feels like friends who annoy each other, like that kind of annoyance where you're not actually annoyed with them, you're just kind of like giving them shit. Whereas I feel in some of the previous books, they've genuinely been frustrated and annoyed with each other, which is a little less fun to read.
Yeah, exactly. In this, it was banter
Yes.
instead of coworkers who are like, God, I have to do something to amuse myself if I have to be forced to hang out with you.
Yeah, and like it's really fun to see them both think that they're manipulating the other one into doing what they want when really the other one is just kind of like knows what's happening and is going along with it. And it turns out that they're just, friends.
There was one moment when Nanny Ogg, the mother in the witch coven, although this is a two-witch coven at this moment, is suggesting that they go to the opera, and Granny Weatherwax, the crone, although no one would call her that to her face, says something along the lines of, nah. And I think Nanny's internal dialogue there is, oh, I can tell that she's not actually saying no. She's saying, please convince me.
Yeah, that's a good moment. I really like their dynamic in this book and the way that they play off of each other and clearly get each other.
The book does start with Nanny getting a windfall because she publishes a dirty sex book thinly veiled as recipes. And so they get a bunch of royalties from that after much effort.
Yeah, I was gonna say her initial windfall is $1 extra because she sent $1 to them to publish the book, and they sent her $1 back, or they sent her $2 back, or something.
Well, Granny goes and bullies the publisher into giving her royalties, which good for Granny.
Good for Granny.
And then she spends all the money. That was a little lame. Like, they didn't even both get pedicures. Granny was like, stand there and watch me get a pedicure with your money. And that sucked a little bit.
I mean, yes, objectively, that's quite rude. I found it very funny. And it did lead to some good lines like Nanny comments that it's easy to hold everything in common when no one's got anything because the witches have this thing, and the way that Granny gets Nanny to spend the money is by saying, we always everything is shared, That's just how we do it. And to Nanny's point, yeah, when you don't have anything, it's easy to share.
I just feel like I, and by extension Nanny, would have just gone, okay, me too now. Like, why wouldn't she also be spending the money? I get that Granny was the one who was infiltrating the opera as a fancy rich bitch, but Nanny could have enjoyed some of the pampering prep work as well.
Nanny could have.
She should have gotten a pedicure with a glass of champagne. She deserves it.
We all deserve a pedicure with a glass of champagne.
Oh, don't tempt me. The weather changed and I'm just like grown scales. And I would like to pay someone to deal with that. Maybe that's why I was so upset, because I was just like, you're sitting here with a pocket full of thousands of dollars, and you are not also getting a pedicure. What is wrong with you?
Not a pocket full, a petticoat full.
Yes, also fantastic. And yes. Oh, the descriptions of every time she had to get money out, of all the twanging elastic.
Yeah, that was fun. This is a fun book. I don't know if I'll ever call it one of my favorites, but it's a really just enjoyable read.
Well, if you're not going to read any of your classism quotes, I will end us with my very, very good, excellent quote about the intersection between opera and the unseen university where the wizards are, and how they convince the librarian from the university to play some music for the opera house.
I mean, I can read one of my classism quotes, but we kind of have already talked about the classism. So I think you should go ahead and read your unseen university / opera quote.
This is the librarian. I don't think he has a name. He's the librarian at Unseen University, but Much more importantly, he's their organist. And it turns out that our organ is a Johnson. And now we break to giggle for 10 minutes, which I will cut out later. Anyway, Johnson is the name of an inventor that shows up in Discworld a lot.
Bloody stupid Johnson, whose inventions are always offbeat, to put it nicely.
But the dick joke, Sarah. The dick joke.
Yes, the dick joke.
It's great that we're getting insight into how people react to you the way they expect to react to you no matter what you do, and how that can be both extremely heartbreaking to experience as a person, but also can be turned to your advantage. Also, dick jokes. It's very important. So before we get into the spoiler conversation, when should you read this book?
When should you read this book? I keep going back and forth about it because for the most part, I think it's a self-contained, enjoyable story. And I think you probably could start here if you really wanted to.
I think it benefits from playing off of Phantom of the Opera. So if you're familiar with that source material, you could enter into Discworld from here, even if you're not familiar with Discworld as a whole.
Yes, I agree. If you're not familiar with Phantom of the Opera, I probably wouldn't recommend starting with it, just because I think that it does help to have more context for the witches. But you could start here if you wanted to.
You're right. I'm not arguing with you. But
For
I think
once.
we're using the wrong... For once. I think we're using the word familiar incorrectly when it comes to Phantom of the Opera. Because, like I said, I saw it once in middle school, and that counts.
I mean, I've never seen it, so...
Just like a broad stroke understanding of the plot. And there are some scenes in this book that tickle something in the back of my memory that makes me think it's maybe a more direct pull than I can really articulate. But I think it's more important to be amused by the concept of Phantom of the Opera than it is to be super familiar with it.
Yeah, like if you're an opera fan or a musical theater fan, I think this is a good starting point, or as good a starting point as any. I agree that you probably don't have to have a very in-depth working knowledge of Phantom of the Opera to start here. But on the other hand, if you're like me and haven't seen Phantom of the Opera, I probably would recommend starting with one of the earlier Witches books.
Yeah, it helps to be familiar with at least one of the elements here.
Yes.
And I'm not counting Singing in the Rain as one of the elements. That's more of a conceit of the novel.
The Singing in the Rain reference, if it is a Singing in the Rain reference, as you say, you don't need to know Singing in the Rain to get what's going on in the book.
No, it's just a familiar trope that I recognized. And when I Googled some like very awkward keywords, it came right up. So I don't think I'm wrong.
No, I mean, I'm sure that it shows up in Singing in the Rain too, and it probably is a reference, but it's a plot point that you don't need to understand the reference for.
Not at all, no.
To avoid spoilers, skip to 4110.
I cannot believe you were not sad about the rat catcher.
I didn't say I wasn't sad about him.
You did. I'm gonna find that.
He was not. I was sadder. I was sadder about other characters, specifically the singing master or whoever it was,
Mr. Underwood or whatever.
Yeah, because he was genuinely really supportive of Agnes, and like when he heard her sing, he was like, she should not be the voice behind Christine. She should be her own star because she's phenomenal. And then he died, and I was really sad that she lost this supportive character.
That's true. To be fair, I think I was extra speed reading at that point. So maybe that didn't have quite the emotional punch it should have.
I mean, like, it wasn't that I cared about his death particularly. It was more that I cared that she lost this person in her corner, person who is very specifically going to be in her corner.
So what I think struck me the most about the killings was how the crowd turned on them. Like, he was a beloved music director, but as soon as he was dead, people started saying he was kind of weird. He was probably the ghost all along and then killed himself. And that's harsh.
Yeah, the way that everyone in the opera responded to the killings was just, it was kind of wild. Specifically the way that they talked about the people who had died.
And I think part of that can be explained by the spirit of the theater, which is, basically its own character, right?
Yeah.
And just encouraging people, not to the degree that, what was that early witches book? Was that the first one? That was like Hamlet and Macbeth all mixed together.
Oh, Weird Sisters?
Yeah.
That's not the first granny book, but it is really what I would consider the first witches book. But I think that technically, according to the Wikipedia page, it's not the first witches book.
Well, Wikipedia can be wrong. I would say there are some similarities between Weird Sisters and Maskerade, just in that it treats the machine of a performance as its own being, and the performance or the opera house or the playhouse or whatever exerts its influence on the people in it.
I don't think that's specific to just those two stories. I think that that's kind of a through line in any of the Discworld books that talks about a performance.
True, but these two are about performances. So
I agree it's very evident, but I don't think that it's unique to these two books, is all I'm saying.
Okay, it is a tenet of the Discworld, and these are
Yes.
two books where it is extremely well explored. How's that?
Yes. I will I will agree with that statement. I'll stop being pedantic.
All right, thank you. I guess because, yeah, there was the Hollywood book.
Yeah, and like it's kind of like talked about, I think, and like mentioned in other books, but
Yeah.
But you're right. These are the two books that really predominantly talk about live theater.
And it's the main thrust of the novel.
Yeah.
So we can use that to hand wave how absolutely cold-hearted and vicious people are to these murders. These poor victims. But that's not really, I mean, it's probably supposed to be enough. But I think it was more striking to me, not how they were like, oh, whatever, show must go on, but how quickly they were to turn on the person who was found killed. I guess this really only happens to the music director, Mr. Is Underwood his name? That feels
Or
wrong.
Undertow or something. I don't know.
I want to say Undertaker, and I know that's wrong.
Like I said, I read this like 3 weeks ago, so I don't remember any names.
It's fine. And then there's Walter, who's just like the sweet gopher, do anything handyman, just like helpful kid who everyone like defends. Every single person in the playhouse is like, Walter's just a sweet kid, because Agnes gets in her head that Walter is the murderer. And then the second that he disappears, people say, oh, he's dead. We killed the ghost. He was the murderer all along. And it's like, wow, you did not stick to your convictions very long there.
Yeah, I feel like that is kind of playing on this idea of the behind the scenes being a lot more cutthroat than anything that an audience realizes, and how there are all of these different like factions and people gunning for other people's jobs and things like that in any kind of theater troupe. I mean, not that I've been in theater, so I don't know how true that is, but like that's kind of, like that's kind of the stereotype that I feel exists, and that Pratchett is playing with.
It is. And we also get the excuse of, the living spirit of the opera house. And Salzara, I think, Salzer, the director, who was the actual murderer, who specifically played off of the character of the ghost to cover up his murders, which I felt in my heart when I was doing this reread, but I didn't actually remember that was the answer, and I'm pretty sure I only knew that because I had read it before.
Yeah, I'm certain that I did not see that coming the very first time I read this book.
No. I mean, he was shady, but he doesn't strike you as a murderer. But then you keep hearing this repetition that the ghost has always been friendly. The ghost has always been good luck. And so it makes such perfect sense that, yeah, this dickbag used the ghost's identity, this like fake anonymous identity, to commit murders and then pin it on the sweet kid who was the actual ghost doing nice stuff, sending people roses.
Yeah.
That's devious. That's a great twist.
It's a good twist, and the realization that you come to that there are two ghosts, like that's a really excellent moment in the book, because like I said before, the first time I did not see that coming at all.
And it's such a perfect moment for the witches to pontificate a little bit, which they do quite a bit.
The witches pontificate? They would never.
About how people were so sure there was one ghost that they were trying to justify the one man teleporting instead of just saying, oh yeah, there's two dudes in masks. Which when you say it that way is so obvious.
It's a great way of playing with expectations and kind of how ridiculous it is that you'll get an idea in your head that doesn't necessarily account for logic, but because that's what you're thinking, like that's what you've settled on, you don't look at what is actually realistic.
There's I'm forced to confront many lame self-help quotes, unfortunately, in my day-to-day. But one that is less lame is like, examine your assumptions, I think is the way it's phrased. And I think that's a very thoughtful concept and something that, I mean, more in the moment in this book because it's all like on the spot and, oh my God, people are dying. Quick, figure it out. But in general, it does sort of loop back around to that, which is like, what are you assuming is true in this moment? And is that reasonable, or are you just comfortable with that?
Yeah, and I think that it is a very good way of showcasing that what witches do is not necessarily magic, but is doing that kind of examination of assumptions and examination of evidence. And that's kind of like the whole underlying theme of the witches' books. I feel like, yes, they can do magic, but it's as much about them not doing magic as it is about them actually doing magic.
It's about them truly understanding the scenario they're presented with. And sometimes the answer is some motherfucking magic.
Yeah.
But sometimes the answer is just like hug the crying kid backstage. Is that magic, or is that just Nanny Ogg being a mom?
And I did like Granny acknowledging that Nanny Ogg does better in some situations than she does in this book, like comforting people.
Yeah. I mean, they both have their strengths, right?
Yeah.
And they played together very well.
Yeah. I mean, going back to our earlier point in the non-spoiler section about them actually feeling like friends who are bantering and not coworkers who are kind of genuinely annoyed, like it did, in moments like this, it did feel like this was a friend acknowledging where someone else shored up their weaknesses.
I agree. Part of me wonders, well, no part of me wonders. I can say with my whole heart that I feel like that was just an evolution of the books and a quirk of the plots, and less like a genuine character relationship progression, but I cannot articulate why I think that. It would have been nice if it felt like that was like a steady growth over time where it was going with purpose, but I don't think that's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I don't think it necessarily was, and we'll see how much of it continues in the next book. Carpe Ugulum, I think, is the next witch's book.
Ugulum.
Whatever. I didn't. My one Latin class was taught in French.
I think that's a church Latin versus classical Latin thing. That's my understanding anyway. Not the point. The point is,
not the point.
Yes, I much prefer the witches' relationship and their dynamic in this book. It'd be really nice if I thought that it was growth over time, but it doesn't feel like that to me. It feels more like the author, Pratchett, finally like settled into how he wanted them to banter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I also think that seeing how they interact in the next book will solidify or disprove that feeling.
Plus vampires.
Plus vampire. I mean,
is that a spoiler? It's called Carpe Jugulum. I don't think that's a spoiler.
It's not a spoiler. And if I recall correctly, and my confidence in my memory of how good these books are is all shaken up after interesting times.
No. Well, at least this one was very good.
Yeah, this one I didn't remember as being, well, no, that's not true. I remembered it as being fine. I just also remembered it as with this frustration of having only been able to read this for 2 weeks. But I believe that Carpe Jugulum or Jugulum, however you want to pronounce it, is a pretty good book.
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
We will, but not until next year.
Jesus Christ, really? Oh, you next Witch's book. That's not the next Discworld book.
It's not the next Discworld book.
I was like, we're not that backlogged. One of the running gags in this book is that there is a character, a star of the opera, who everyone assumes really wants these very fancy foreign dishes involving squid and pasta and all sorts of things that make me very hungry.
Can you hold this thought for just one moment?
Yes.
Because I want to go see if I own a copy of Nanny Ogg's cookbook, because I think I might.
Oh my god.
So, hold on. And lo.
Is this relevant? Does she have squid pasta in there?
Well, I don't know if she has Clutie dumplings or squid pasta, but
you just gave away the words are weird. Fine, it's
sorry.
Clutie dumplings.
But was it Nanny Ogg's cookbook, or was it the Joy of Cooking she had written? Joy of Snacks. And I ask that because in this copy of Nanny Ogg's cookbook it says by the same author, The Joy of Snacks Band. So I'm wondering if that was actually the one that
was
she wrote.
The name of the cookbook.
Okay.
That was actually just a bunch of sex moves or something. / aphrodisiacs. It was a little unclear.
It's a little unclear. There is banana. There's a lot of nas in there. Soup surprise. So people say, what's so surprising about banana? No, I'm never going to be able to say that word correctly. Soup.
Banana na na.
Yeah, banana na na.
Anyone who knows that joke, you're welcome.
And I say it's got banana na nas in it. Of course, if you've ever read my book, The Joy of Snacks, you'll spot that some of my special ingredients have been left out. People complained they made the soup a bit too surprising. I can't decide if this sounds horrible or just kind of odd. 4 large bananas peeled, some vegetable stock, some dry sherry, some ground nutmeg, some brown sugar, some chopped chervil, salt and pepper, a teaspoon of lemon juice. Chop 2 of the bananas, of the bananas, and put into a pan with the stock. Blend or mash until the bananas are smooth and well or blended. Bring the liquid to simmering, taking care not to let it boil, and add the remaining ingredients. Stir until the sugar is dissolved and simmer for another 5 minutes. Take the remaining 2 bananas and chop them in a half widthwise. Place each half in a bowl pointing upwards. Pour in some soup and serve. Surprising, eh?
I completely zoned out. I hope you don't expect me to give you a good reaction to that.
It's like this weird combination of sweet and savory with like the vegetable stock, but also lots of brown sugar and bananas blended. It's just weird. I can't decide if I think it would be good or not.
I bet you'd be surprised.
I'm sure I would be surprised. So, they do have a recipe for Clutie dumplings. Nanny Ogg's Maids of Honor. Take your eyes off them and they end up as tarts. Just my little joke. No offense meant.
That was a line directly from this book. These are all great dirty jokes. But I was most surprised by the one that was not a dirty joke. I was sure Clootie Dumpling was actually like a vulva or something, or however British works, because apparently Fanny's like a vulva over there. I basically assume any word I don't know what it means is vulva. But it's totally not. It's actually like a pastry.
Clootie Dumpling makes me think butts.
Dumpling does, you're right. That is more of a butt thing.
Yeah.
I just default to vulva with British slang because Fanny has just made me assume.
Vulva and butts.
That's a combination. That sure is something, huh? But it's neither of those things. They were just like, mix some spices into dough and boil it in cloth. First of all, what the fuck? That's unacceptable food.
Well, you know that also for Christmas we're gonna have to try making Clootie dumplings.
I mean, sure. I'd probably rather be eating a vulva, but gotta try everything once.
There is a recipe for Clootie dumplings in here.
I googled it and I was immensely disappointed.
There's something about mustard.
Excuse me?
Yeah. This recipe makes 4 large ones.
That's not that funny. It's almost funny.
But there's flour, suet, whole grain mustard, salt, pepper, water, stock, and then you mix it all together and roll into balls, and then you drop in the dumplings and simmer them.
So the internet says that the whole point of Clootie dumplings is that you wrap them in a clootie to boil them. And it's a clootie cloth.
Not according to Nanny Ogg's cookbook.
Yeah, because why the fuck would you do that? That's completely unnecessary. But that's where the name came from, and that's what a real one is.
Actually, and that is referenced in this recipe description, and I quote, "But the days of the giant family-sized dumpling boiled up in a clootie or moth-eaten old vest seem to have passed." So they do, I guess, hint at the origin of the word clootie.
I'm going to start referring to my Fanny as a clootie. Which one am I talking about? You don't know. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. And we've also started a Mastodon account because who knows what's going on with Twitter these days. Although you will pry Twitter from my cold dead hands, or you will make me pay to access it because I'm not going to pay a subscription to access tweets.
Over my dead body or my bank account.
Yes. But we do have, as of today, we do have a Mastodon account. We're not very active on it because I'm grumpy about switching platforms, but it does exist. We are Fiction Fans Pod at mastodon.social. So you can find us there. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
We also have a Discord channel, which is a little more active than Mastodon because I know it exists, unlike Mastodon. We have a Mastodon account? Wait, is it called an account?
I told you, as of today, we
Okay.
are tooting on Mastodon.
That's incredible. I love that. We also occasionally post TikToks, but that's not really a conversation platform, so I guess if you want to see bad jokes, go there. But if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also, while we're on a discussion of where we can be found on the internet, we also have a Patreon where you can support us, and you can find our show notes when we bother to post them, and a somewhat amount of other nonsense.
There is an amount of other nonsense, although really not as much as there probably ought to be. We need to produce more nonsense, Sarah. Thank you again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.